It's not often that I talk about MCU movies on this channel, but we're doing that today because Deadpool and Wolverine just came out and I have some thoughts about this film. So let's get into it. So in terms of my background with this franchise, Deadpool, Wolverine, the MCU, the whole shebang, I don't hate it, but I'm not the biggest fan of it either. I am somewhere in the middle with the MCU. I'm not the type of person that has it as one of my most anticipated movies whenever a new release comes out. But when it comes out, I'm probably going to go see it. And 9 times out of 10 have a decent enough time with. The X-Men movies and the Wolverine movies are a little bit more spotty, where you have a film that is an absolute disaster 1 minute and the next one of the best movies that Marvel has come out with. Logan, the final film with Wolverine, was probably my favorite film across any of these movies and is one of my favorite Marvel movies, period. I really, really love that film and what it managed to achieve. Deadpool, I also had a lot of fun with, especially when it was releasing. The first one I thought was kind of special, and the second one I went to a midnight release for and had a blast with it. As I've gotten older, their charm has worn off on me a little bit, where it just doesn't feel as funny or fresh as it used to. And I think that's because Ryan Reynolds has played the same character in every single movie he's in, so that style of comedy just doesn't quite work for me as much as it used to. But I did rewatch them leading into this movie, and I still had a decent enough time with them. There's been so much talk about this movie being the savior of the MCU, and I just don't think that's the case here. I really want to keep your expectations in check because I found myself to be a little bit disappointed with a number of elements within this film, even though it does feel fun for the most part. As I mentioned before, while the Ryan Reynolds shtick just doesn't quite work for me anymore, he does excel at playing Deadpool. It is his probably best character that he's ever played, where he just levels up a notch in these movies, and he does that again here. I found his style of comedy, while spotty within this movie, to genuinely have some laugh out loud moments that I really, really enjoyed and add so much fun to this whole thing. The whole gimmick with this movie was him playing off Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. And they are a dynamic duo. They do play well off each other. Logan being such a self-serious character and Deadpool making a joke out of everything. This juxtaposition between these characters, I do enjoy for the most part. The film is also littered with a number of really great fight scenes. I particularly loved one near the end of the movie that was so bloody and so stylish, and I can't really talk about what it entails because it would spoil certain elements of the movie, but it was just a blast, and certain fight scenes like that just really gave you a hit of endorphins and just feels so great to watch. It is such a crowd pleaser, this movie. And I think that if you're the type that really, really loves Marvel movies, that really, really loves Deadpool, applauds at all of the cameos in movies whenever a character appears, this movie is for you. You're going to have a blast with this movie, and I actually highly recommend you check this movie out, despite the shortcomings that I'm about to talk about with this movie. Also, this feels less of an MCU movie at times and more of a send-off to the Fox X-Men universe. And when it dived into those elements, I found myself really enjoying those moments and found it to be quite touching at points, especially as someone who mostly enjoyed a lot of those movies. Of course, it is still tying into the MCU, and that's where I found that this movie had a lot of shortcomings. Also, before I go into negatives, I do have to mention that Dogpool is the absolute best. He's not in the movie all that much, but when he does appear in this movie, he is an absolute scene stealer. I mean, it is the most cutest yet ugliest dog I've ever seen, and it was just hilarious, the scenes that this dog was in. I absolutely loved the inclusion of this character. Okay, so this movie feels like the type of movie that a lot of people are going to say this is a top 5 movie of the year, one of the best movies I've ever seen, one of the best movies of the MCU, for about a 2-month period. After that period ends, I will not hear a single weep from this movie because I don't think this movie leaves a lasting impact. It relies too much on just superhero cliches and trappings that have held back this genre and have been a huge detriment to the MCU because it does feel like Marvel has fundamentally forgotten what made those movies click with people in the first place. The biggest one being the cameos. It has been talked about everywhere that there's a lot of cameos in this movie, and that is completely true. There is a thematic underline between these cameos, so I did like that they had some purpose within the film. But as a whole, I mean, it feels like we're just digging at the bottom of the barrel with some of these cameos. I mean, there's epic music playing for an appearance for someone that no one has cared about for years. There's also another one that has perhaps maybe the worst performance of the year, but I did think it was doing it intentionally, so I kind of got charmed by it as the film progressed and kind of dug it as it moved on. And as a whole, that was probably my favorite cameo because it was having a lot of fun with it. The rest of them just felt like cheap fan service to please fans, and there were people applauding in my screening. And I was like, really, for this? I mean, we can do a lot better here. They just don't work for me anymore. They did, 5-10 years ago. Maybe I'm getting too old. Maybe I'm getting too cynical. But these are just so cheap to me now and hide from the major shortcomings that these types of movies tend to have. And Deadpool and Wolverine is no stranger to these shortcomings. There's shortcomings that the film actively references, and just because you make a joke about the shortcoming doesn't mean the shortcoming's not there anymore, because there are certain elements such as a real lack of telling a story in a satisfying way or developing characters in a way that is remotely interesting or tries something different. It relies too much on just telling you every single little thing. And it just feels like amateur hour with some of this writing. You could do so much more here. And I've seen so much more be achieved in a Deadpool movie than what this manages to achieve. And I do think out of the 3 Deadpool movies, this is the weakest one. I think Deadpool 1 and 2 are a lot better in terms of quality. Felt like a lot more just interesting, had better character development, and while they were fairly generic in their structure, you still managed to get something out of those movies beyond just some fourth wall breaking humor. If it was just doing that, it wouldn't be a well-remembered movie, but because it has layers to it, it has characters that are interesting that you can connect with, it makes it all the more fun, and I just don't think this managed to achieve it. And if you look at this movie based on just being an individual standalone movie, you would think that this would have these major shortcomings. It is just purely relying on your memory of the X-Men movies and a different version of Wolverine rather than the one that we're getting in this movie. And let's talk about Wolverine, because I had a lot of skepticism going into this movie about this character. I'm the type that really enjoys a conclusion to a story, and that is that. Let it rest. I am someone that still hasn't seen Toy Story 4 because the ending of Toy Story 3 I thought was perfect. I don't need to see it anymore. The story is done. And I did feel that a little bit going into this movie because I did think Logan was the perfect ending for that character. And now we're just left with this, and it feels so underwhelming, and I don't really understand, apart from the gimmick of teaming up with Ryan Reynolds in this Deadpool movie and making a boatload of money, why this was the movie that compelled Hugh Jackman to come back and play this character. I mean, it's fun. It can be decent enough at times with these decent fight sequences and this great chemistry between these 2 lead actors, but it just doesn't justify him returning post the amazing ending of Logan. And don't give me the crap that, it's a different Logan from a different universe. I know that. I don't give a damn. It's still utilizing a lot of member berries to get a reaction out of you. I thought the villains were also severely underwhelming. I mean, I'm already forgetting a lot of details about them. And as the film slowly starts to focus on them a little bit more and what they're doing in the third act, that was the least compelling act to me. I thought the first two acts were filled with fun and whimsy and just had a lot of charm to them, while still being a little bit flawed. That last act felt a little bit tedious to get through because these villains just did not cut it for me. And then lastly, this is a problem with many Marvel movies, especially in the MCU, and it's the over-reliance of green screen. I mean, these movies cost so much money to make. And I mean, can we just shoot on location? I mean, a couple of times. Make this feel real and authentic. Overall, Deadpool and Wolverine can be a lot of fun. And I never felt myself absolutely hating this movie or anything like that. I think it's fine enough, but it's not incredible. I think it's very flawed. And while I have probably talked more about the flaws in this movie than the positives, I don't think this is terrible. I really don't. I think it's just fine. I'm happy enough with a lot of it, but there's just certain elements that I just wish were taken out of this because I do think it bogs this movie down. And I can see how a really great movie could come of these concepts that we're introduced to, but it just doesn't do enough with it and just strays too far into just trying to be a cheap crowd pleaser rather than something just interesting. As a score, I'm going to give Deadpool and Wolverine a 3 out of 5. And I do feel like I'm being a little bit kind to it when I do give it that score. I do think over time this movie isn't going to age all that great in the future. But as of right now, 3 out of 5, it's okay enough. And I do think that if you love these movies, you should really go see it. Despite what I said, go check it out. But if these kinds of things annoy you, don't watch this movie. And those are my thoughts towards Deadpool and Wolverine. Let me know what you think about this movie in the comments below. I'm happy to have a discussion with you guys, but please don't take what I say personally. I'm just a dude who watched a movie and had an opinion, okay? It's not that deep. I'm not personally attacking you. If you love the movie, that is great. I really want everyone to love as many movies as they can. But just because it doesn't work for me, doesn't mean it's not going to work for you. Love to have that discussion with you guys. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.